Okay, so we're still on page 23 of the workbook, but we're doing two-step equations now. So example 2.25, solve the equations for the given variable. So we just need to make sure we get our variable parts equal to our constants, so our variable term. So we have a couple of different things to do. I'm going to do C and D actually, because those have the fractions in them, and you can try A and B after I'm done with those. So for part C, we have we want to add 6 to both sides first to isolate our variable term here. We want to get that by itself. So we end up, that goes out, so we're left with 2/3 A equals -4 plus 6 will give us a 2. Then we multiply both sides by the reciprocal here to force that coefficient to be 1. So we multiply both sides by 3/2, and it might be good practice to write that 2/1. So this all will reduce to 1 and leave us with just an A equals, these reduce, equals 3. On the next one over here, D, we are going to subtract 1 from both sides first. Then we have T/5 equals 0, and that's okay. Don't let that throw you off. And then multiply both sides by 5. We end up getting T equals 0. And if we pop that in, that makes sense, because when we have 0 in a numerator, then we will have 0 for the answer. So try A and B. So these I'm going to just write, pause and do on own. Then check. Okay, so your answers for A should be x equals -3, and for B, n equals 4. Okay, now we have page 24, 2.1.4 general equations. So the steps that we're going to follow is we want to deal with grouping symbols. If we have anything inside parentheses that we could combine, we would want to do that. If not, we will need to distribute to remove the parentheses and free up the variable. So we want to isolate our variable term by after we combine like terms on each side and simplify, we want to isolate our variable term and then set it equal to a number. And then we're going to go ahead and use the multiplication or division property there to solve and get the x or whatever the variable is all by itself, isolate that, and then we're going to verify the solution. You don't have to do that every time, but if I do ask you specifically on a quiz or a test, you will want to show that for credit. Okay, so this first one, example 2.6, solve the equation by using the general strategy. So we have A is 2 times quantity x plus 3 equals 12. First thing we're going to do is distribute. So we get 2x plus 6 equals 12. Then we're going to subtract 6 from both sides. And we get 2x equals 6. Divide both sides by 2. You don't always have to write that out, but I'm going to go ahead and do that just for now. We want to start, streamlining. X equals 6. Oops, sorry, x equals 3. There we go. And then check that back in. 3 plus 3 would be 6 times 2 is 12. So now part B, again, distribute. So we would have 6 times quantity 3y plus 2 and quantity minus 8 equals -2. So distribute first and then see if you can streamline that down. I'll leave that one for you to do on your own and then check the answer. I'll write up the steps though. Okay, so here's the steps for that. Anytime you have a fraction as an answer, do make sure you reduce it so there's no common factors. Sorry about that. Sometimes the Zoom goes crazy on this. So it should be y equals negative 1/3 for the answer for that one. I'm going to do C. So we have 3 times quantity x minus 1 minus quantity 4x minus 5 and quantity equals 2 times quantity 5x minus 1 and quantity minus 7. So a lot of distributing to do here. So we have 3x minus 3. Then this subtract gets distributed. You can think of it as a 1 in there if you want to write it as like a plus negative 1 and distribute that. So we would have a minus 4x plus 5, whatever works for you. Sometimes that just makes it look a little odd for people, but some find it helpful. Equals 10x times 2 times the negative 1 is minus 2. And then lastly, we have that minus 7. Make sure you don't keep distributing when we shouldn't. That's outside the parentheses. So now we're going to go ahead and combine like terms. So we have a 3x and a negative 4x. So we have a minus x. Minus 3 plus 5 will give us a positive 2. And then we have 10x minus 9 on the right hand side. Now we can start collecting things, get our variable term to one side equal to a number on the other side. It doesn't really matter which one. I'm going to actually add x to both sides. Go that route, and then I end up with 2 equals 11x minus 9. Then I'm going to add the 9 to both sides. And I get 11 equals 11x. Divide both sides by 11. And I get x equals 1. And that's my answer. Again, you can verify by putting it back in. You can even kind of do that in your head. I'll leave that for you to do on your own if you want to. So for D, we have some decimals. We could clear the decimal if we wanted to. That's a technique that I'll show you a little bit later. But for now, you do get to use calculators. You're at home, but keep in mind that when you go back and you have your next course, you may or may not be allowed calculators for a proctored test. So make sure you mix it up. Try some things without your calculator, try some things with a calculator. Usually when I give a no calculator test for intermediate algebra or like pre-calc or something like that, I'm going to allow calculators for things that are messy to work with. But when it's no calculator, I'm going to make sure the numbers work out nicely and they stay relatively small. It varies professor to professor though. So for D, go ahead and distribute that. I'm going to read the problem, then leave it for you to do and give you the answer. Negative 0.3 times quantity 2x minus 5 and quantity equals 0.7 times quantity 3 minus x in parentheses. So go ahead and do that one as a classwork. And then check. Okay, so for this one, we get an answer of x equals 6. I'm going to read through it just so you know. Negative 0.6x plus 1.5 equals 2.1 minus 0.7x. Negative 0.6x equals 0.6 minus 0.7x. I subtracted the 1.5 from both sides. 0.1x equals 0.6 and x equals 6 finally. So if you have questions about any of these classworks or even the examples that I do out with you, just make sure you mark on the video maybe where it is, but preferably if you know the page of the workbook, that would be really helpful, and the specific example number and letter too. So that way, if maybe I made an error and you can let me know when I can then go back in and edit that. Also, you might just not know where one point to the next, what happened in there and why it happened, because as we streamline, I'm going to start skipping some things that normally maybe in Math 92 or a different kind of algebra class, like an entry level, you would have had to been writing every little iota out. And now we're kind of streamlining. We still definitely need to know what's in between point A and point B, but might look a little different. So start paying attention to that. I also try to tell you how I grade as we do these as well. Okay, we're on page 25. This is the last page of 2.1, and there's only 4 problems, but they are kind of long ones, so bear with me. I think I'm going to do 2.7 part B, because that one's a little longer. If you want to try any of them, always just try it on your own. Just pause the video and check. You don't have to wait for me to do it out. You can, depending where you're at. A is definitely smaller, and you can do that one on your own. So let me do this example here for B. So that's why I'm starting there. So first thing we want to do is look at all the denominators, and if I can do what's called clearing the denominator, that really helps me to streamline the problem, especially when you're not using calculators. You can wipe out the fractions. The only time you can do this is when it's an equation, okay? So you got to make sure it's solving an equation. Do not try to clear fractions on an expression. If there's no equal sign involved, don't use this method. The only other time you'll ever use this method is when we do complex rational fractions. They're fractions within fractions, and because we can balance off the top with the bottom, then that works. But this method will not work if there's nothing to balance. So be careful of that. But here we have an equality, so we can go ahead and multiply by the LCD, which is going to be 30 in this case. So if I multiply every term, or both sides, I'm going to multiply by 30 on both sides. So I'm multiplying both sides of the equation by the same value. Get rid of that. I have balanced, so it's a legal thing to do. So then I'm going to distribute. So one way to think of it is multiply every term by the lowest common multiple. So when I do this, I'm going to write it out so that you can see what's happening. So we're going to have 3/5 n, and that's going to be times my 30, and then minus the 7/10 times the 30, and this is like over 1, right? We don't want to go 30 times 3 and 30 times 5. That's a weird thing to do. So it's just a whole number. It's not 30 over 30. We're not getting a common denominator. We're clearing the denominator. Different thing. So be careful of that. Then we have the 30 over 1 times my -4, and that's over 1. Don't forget about the whole numbers. Those need to be taken care of also, because they're every term, right? So then we have 30 times 7/15 times n. And now what's going to happen is we're going to go ahead and reduce it all. So 5 into 5 is 1, 5 into 30 is 6, 10 into 10 is 1, 10 into 30 is 3. This one we just leave alone. The 30 times the -4, just leave it. And then lastly, we have 15 into 15 is 1, 15 into 30 is 2. So then we go ahead and streamline it all. And we should get, so now we're going to have 6 times 3n is going to be 18n minus 21 equals -30, or 30 times -4. That's going to give us -120. And then plus 2 times the 7n is 14n. Okay, so I think I have everything there. All right. Did I get them all? Yeah. All right, so now we're going to, from here, you probably can do it on your own. We're going to add 21 to both sides. And simultaneously, I know that goes out, so I want to subtract the 14n from both sides also. Kind of do those in the same line at this level. So now I have 18n minus 14n is going to be 4n equals the negative 120 plus 21 is negative 99. Divide both sides by 4. And I end up with n equals negative 99 over 4. And just leave it that way. And that's your answer for B. Told you that one was kind of long. So then pause the video and do this as a classwork for part A, and I'll just write the answer up for that one. Okay, so for the answer for part A, 3/4 x minus a half equals 5/6. The answer is x equals 16 over 9. So when we have parentheses involved, usually it's best to multiply out, distribute first. You could clear if you want to, but keep in mind that once we do that, I'm gonna do A doing that way, clearing on the outside of the parentheses. So I'm not going to distribute first, and I'm just going to put some big parentheses around here. And my common denominator would be 4. So I'm going to multiply both sides of the equation by 4. And when I do that, I'll get 4 times a half. I'll just reduce that down to be 2. But then here, I'm going to multiply 4 times the 3/4, but that's it. Now I'm done with the multiplying. I would leave the 3. I don't then distribute that 4 again because we only will multiply. We don't distribute over multiplication. Once we hit that and use it, we're done with it. So I still need to write this parentheses 2x minus 4/9. So that helped me somewhat because it boiled it down to just having one fraction. But sometimes it's better just to distribute and then clear, especially if you tend to double dip and doing it to past the parentheses when you shouldn't. And if that's confusing to you, it's just easier to distribute first. So this one, I'm just going to now finish it out. I would have 2 equals 6x. And then the 3 times the negative 4/9. So now I'm distributing because I haven't used this 3 yet. Minus 12 over 9. And then I'm going to add the 12/9 to both sides. So to get a common denominator, I changed my 2 to be 18/9 plus 12/9, and then that will give me 30 over 9 equals 6x. And then I want to multiply both sides by 1/6. Divide by 6 is the same as multiply by 1/6. So I get the x by itself. And now I go ahead and reduce this, and I get 30 over 6. It's going to leave me with a 5 there in the numerator. This, I just get the x by itself, so my answer is going to be x equals 5/9. And that may or may not have been the best route to go. I've done it before, distributing first, and I think that was actually kind of easier. So this one for part B is the last one. You can try it on your own or do it with me, but I would suggest just go ahead and distribute first, and then we'll be sure we get rid of all the denominators, not just some of them. So for this one here, we have 2/3 r plus 8/3 equals 25 r/6 minus, now here's where we have 5 times 7/15. I could reduce that ahead of time. I could go 5 times the 7/15 and just go ahead and reduce that. So I'm left with 1/3 there. Makes it, or well, 7/3 once I multiply out. So that makes it a little easier to work with. Now I'm going to look at my LCD would be 6 will work for me. So I'm going to multiply every term by 6 on both sides. So I'm going to write out what that looks like the long way. So you don't have to do it in your head, but I'm going to pause for a sec. Okay, now I have these all written out across. I just distributed that 6, but I didn't simplify yet. I just listed it out. So I have the 3 into 3 is 1, 3 into 6 is 2. So that's nice. Get rid of that. Then I end up with 2/1 there. Reduce out the 6's. And the last one ends up with a 2 in the numerator and a 1 in the denominator. So now I can streamline it. So I usually call that like kind of cleaning it up. So we have 4r plus 16 equals 25r minus 14. Then we're going to follow the process that we've been using, and you may be able to do that just on your own. I'm going to do it in one line here. So I'm going to subtract 4r from both sides, and then I've done that calculation. So I want to cross that out, and then I'm going to add 14 to both sides. This way I don't kind of end up with 0 on one side weirdly. So then I have 30 equals 21r. Divide both sides by 21. And then I end up with r equals 30/21, but I want to reduce. Divide top and bottom by 3, and I get 10/7. And that's your final answer for that problem. So that's a really long one. So if you want more practice with that, go through the book, do some of the try it problems. You'll get some practice in your homework. So do work enough to get comfortable. I don't want to overwhelm you with the video things, but if you need more, just let me know. So that's it for now. But again, if this clearing the fractions was tricky for you and you're not familiar with it, that's expected. That's kind of where we start up this course, is with that. It's more intense than you've probably had before. There are supplemental videos also that you might want to look at, but definitely email me or come to Zoom office hours for your class. You will have can't remember. I put it in an assignment for you so that you can see what they are. So have a great day. I'll tell you right now, actually, Math 97, you guys are Tuesdays and Thursdays, 11:30 to 12 is your course-specific Zoom time. You do not have to do this. It's optional, but it'd be nice if you could pop in at least once a week, if not twice, and connect with your peers in your class. So let me know if you have any questions about that. Have a great day.